Hello, welcome to AWS Made Easy, which is not episode 71, it's 72. I copied my template over, but Rohini joined us last week. She's not going to join us again, but we were very grateful that she was here. I'm Stephen Barr.
Well, she will join us again
She will.
sometime in the future, but not today.
Yes, not today. This is episode 72. 72. Awesome. It was really fun having her on last week. We talked about what it's like going to reInvent for the first time or Vegas for the first time. We've got some shorts coming out this week.
Correct.
It's kind of fun. We last week I was on Build On Live with Dargo and Rohini, and we iterated on the shorts approval flow because when we have guests on, we want to make sure that when we edit their content that it still represents what they say, right? It'd be easy to edit their content and have something that wasn't their intention.
Correct.
And so every short that we publish, it gets reviewed by the guest before it goes live. And through the time, we built some serverless automation to automate that process. So that was kind of fun to do on Build On Live last week.
That's awesome. So how was your weekend?
Really good.
How's it get started?
Let's see. We started. I mean, I think we're all on 110% effort mode at the moment, but it's been really good. It's nice and cold here now, and that's been fun.
Oh, that's awesome.
How about you?
We actually in India have the festival season. So today was Dussehra, which is a big festival over here. And so all of last week was Navratris. There's a lot of, festivities around going and meeting with friends, family, and, other folks. There are lots of, you'll see a lot of stuff online about Navratris in India. It's a big celebration. And today is the culmination day. So unfortunately, we are working, but everywhere else has been pretty amazing. That said, the big highlight was all of the India matches that have been going on. So India is playing in the World Cup. The World Cup one-day international cricket tournament is currently underway in India. And India is at the top of the table. So that's great news. And some very interesting and close matches recently. Sunday was India-New Zealand. Was an amazing match to watch. Had a lot of friends over, watched it all together. It was amazing fun.
Now, we were discussing some interesting, I guess, facts and figures about Indian cricket. How many people would be watching this show live as it's going on?
I would say that if it's an India-Pakistan match, I wouldn't be surprised if there are nearly 1 billion people watching it simultaneously.
That's incredible.
Live.
So much bandwidth to think about how much.
I mean, the roads become deserted. The roads literally, if it's an India-Pakistan match, you will literally have the country kind of feel like a desolate place because everyone is in their homes. Everyone is watching the match. They're tuned in. But I mean, that used to be the case a few years ago. Now, all of this stuff is available and live streamed on your mobiles, on your iPads, and all of those devices. So people go about whatever they're doing, but at the same time, they're streaming live. And I think Hotstar produced some very interesting stats for the India-Pakistan match that was held about 10 days ago. I think they were concurrently streaming to 250 million people. This is just online streaming with one provider called Hotstar. And they were concurrently streaming to about 250 million people at the same time.
That's incredible. That's a really neat usage of modern day tech to see this.
And they are all on AWS, which is the other amazing part. So I would actually look forward to the next talk they're probably going to do a talk at reInvent about the India-Pakistan match because it set new records for how many concurrent customers they handled in a live stream. And all because of AWS.
Because it's not just streaming, right? But it's messaging and transactions and
it's
all kinds of other things that are happening simultaneously as a result of this. Even merchandise purchases. I'm going to buy a jersey. This player scored, or I'll place a bet, or whatever it is. Right? There's lots of different activity generated by this match.
And if you remember last time, Rohini was talking about, I don't know whether we did it on air or if we did it offline, but we were talking about a lot of other companies that like betting games and your fantasy cricket, teams. There are multiple players in that space. For them, literally, latency matters so much because you have to be able to, analyze results, and the betting is a function of things happening on the field at that particular point in time. So you don't want to create arbitrage by the simple fact that there's tons of latency in what you stream. So this is quite an accomplishment, being able to stream live with low latency at that scale.
And especially with fantasy sports. So for those of our guests who don't know fantasy sports, the idea is you can make a custom team based on a collection of players from all the actual real teams, and then their stats kind of follow the player around. And then so how your team does is an aggregation of how all the players do. And so how those are all changing in real time. And so being able that you couldn't possibly pre-compute that because there's an near infinite number of combinations of how many player fantasy teams could exist. And then the behavior
Correct.
is changing in real time.
Exactly.
So lots of matrix math to add up all those.
Exactly. Now, this should be a lot of fun. I'm actually looking forward to the rest of the matches, but at the same time, looking forward to really understanding how this scale is actually managed. It's going to be a fascinating talk. I really hope the Hotstar team is planning a talk about it at Reinvent. I think it's going to be a use case. I don't think there's any other sport that streams quite at the scale.
No, I couldn't imagine.
I don't know if soccer is probably the number one sport in terms of live viewership, probably during the World Cup, but I don't know if the live streaming is quite that big, even with soccer.
Yeah, and especially with India and Pakistan, both huge populations, both very invested in this match, right? I could see that attracting a lot of people.
Correct. Great.
Well, should we? I wanted to share a fun bit of programming, not trivia, but something that we could all relate to as programmers. I'll put this on the screen. Present this window. I didn't have the right window. There it is. Okay, this came up on Hacker News. I thought we've all been there. We've all tried to debug something like this. I wanted to put this up here. Figure out the absolute path to the script being run is a bit non-obvious. So this is $0%/*. And I think what they're trying to figure out is figure out where the Steam directory is by figuring out where this script is running, but they're using a subshell so that they get a different context in order to execute this command. And that's why then they're saving that as a variable, and then rm-rf.
That is scary. That is honestly scary. Like, I would not do an R. I've suffered incredibly by just doing rm-rf on something. Imagine if Steam root ended up being nothing.
Yeah, that would be.
If Steam root for whatever reason returned absolutely nothing in the output.
Yeah, that would be
disastrous.
You would do rm-rf/. Oh gosh, yeah, that's a great way to ruin your computer.
It's basically rm-rf star at this point, right? Or basically from your root, you're deleting absolutely everything.
So if you are doing this, definitely be more careful than this. But this is fun. I'm sure we've all been there. We've probably all written stuff like that where we thought, oh, this isn't good. And this is the scary part, right? Is that you write scary and it's a note to yourself to go fix it later. And then, it works and you forget about it and you move on to the 100 other priorities. So this is a bit funny. I'll post the link into the LinkedIn comments. And speaking of LinkedIn comments, Santosh Kumar, he gave us a good comment on our previous topic. Yeah, India-Pakistan Mesh is indeed an incredible big event.
Correct.
Cool. Thank you for watching, Santosh. Really appreciate you being here. And please ask any questions. Thank you for your comments and your participations. Still getting the weighting of this new mic stand right. There we go. Let's see.
Awesome. So what's on the agenda today, Stephen?
Well, I had another announcement. Well, we wanted to talk about a few AWS news articles. We also have a few announcements to talk about. I think have been pretty big
Correct.
over the last couple of days. Let's see. Well, first one here is a fun one. If you are in the Seattle area, tonight is the AWS Seattle Users Group, and we are going to talk about generative AI applications on AWS. There's going to be, oh, wow, it jumped from 20 to 29 this morning.
29 attendees.
Yeah, so hopefully it's
Awesome.
going to be a nice, fun, busy conversation about generative AI. Let's have a look at this event. The speaker is Justin Thomas, who's a principal database specialist at Database GTM for nonprofits at AWS. So definitely head over there if you're in the Seattle area. I'll see you tonight. We've got pizzas, and it's just a nice time to socialize and ask questions. It's very low key. It is at the AWS Skill Center, which is a fantastic place. It's on 1319 Terry Avenue. So go over there, see all the cool exhibits that they've set up, have some
One
pizza.
Awesome. One quick shout out to Justin. Justin, by the way, has a long history with AWS, and he's not just a database specialist. He has a lot of experience around Elasticache. He was part of the team that originally came out, and that's how I got to know Justin. I think this is about 6 or 7 years ago. So don't miss out talking to him about Elasticache or Neptune for that matter. He has a huge history and a background in those two databases in particular, and he's an amazing person to talk to. So use that opportunity, go meet up with him. It's really fun to engage with him, and I catch up with him every time I am in Seattle, and I run into him in Vegas during reInvent. So he's an absolutely fun person to be with. So use that opportunity if you're in Seattle and go attend his talk.
I'm going to try and record some of the segments of the talk so we can maybe post some pieces of that. I'll, of course, ask him. But pending that would be fun to see some of the highlights from that event. So stay tuned for that next week.
Absolutely.
We've got another announcement, and I think, Rahul, you're going to have to talk us through the implications of this one. AWS
This
is going
is
to the
big.
FinOps Foundation. Yeah.
Correct. So this is something that the FinOps Foundation has been working on for at least a couple of years. That's more than half of its existence. So having AWS on board, so the first of the three big providers that came on board to the FinOps Foundation was Google. Last year, Microsoft came on board, or actually maybe that was earlier this year. And then finally, we now have AWS also on board. And I think a huge amount of credit for this actually goes to Rick Ox, who has been on this show multiple times. And if you remember, Rick heads the Computer Optimizer team and came on multiple episodes to cover all the features of that. But Rick spent a lot of time working with the FinOps Foundation and AWS creating the PR FAQs for their internal reviews and making a case for AWS to join the FinOps Foundation. I think it's a really, really huge thing. And of course, we've had AWS folks be a part of the FinOps Foundation. Steph Cooch, Alex Head, Yuri, and others have been a part of FinOps Foundation for a while. And you would have seen all of them at FinOpsX as well this year. So huge congratulations to JR and team at the FinOps Foundation for making this happen. It's been a tremendous amount of work. I know that I've seen them work at it for a very long time now. And congratulations. And AWS, really great to have you join the FinOps Foundation. I think there's tons of benefit for all the practitioners of FinOps with them on board as well.
I'm putting the link to this post into the comments, so definitely go there. Follow JR for more of the FinOps Foundation news. And yeah, this is great. This is great news. It was a bit of a deafening gap in presence at FinOpsX, and so we're excited that next time that won't be the case. That AWS will be right there with the other major cloud providers, and it's great. FinOpsX has to navigate this vendor neutral. Take a vendor neutral stance, but then still also acknowledge that this is all about vendors, right? In another sense, and so how to navigate that. So it's great that all of the players are going to be there Yeah,
Exactly.
very excited for this going forward and being able to have a more direct mapping. And like you said, it was huge thanks to Rick as well. And he had a big announcement that he's starting as the technical advisory council member
Yep.
at the FinOps Foundation. So congrats to Rick on that. That's very exciting.
Yeah, I can't think of a better person to join the TAC at the FinOps Foundation than Rick. They're doing some amazing work, creating new standards, creating new collaborations, and making it easier for the FinOps practitioners to actually get get their hands on tools that are going to be standard and readily available to them. And the TAC does a lot of the work behind the scenes to make sure that all the providers, everyone is conforming to certain standards, and they do all the technical assessments. So I couldn't think of a better person to join the TAC than Rick.
Yeah, congrats, Rick. That's exciting. And speaking of Rick, we have him at the last day of reInvent. We're doing a post reInvent show. I'd imagine it's going to be like a post game wrap up where we talk about all the big plays that happened, what's the latest on the scorecard, how do we wind up the season. So that's how we're going to model it. It's going to be a lot of fun. Rick's going to be joining us as well as Lorenzo and others. Lorenzo Winfrey, he was on episode 65. So yeah, really excited
Correct.
for that to happen at reInvent. I think we'll all be able to take a breath after a busy week and just kind of reflect on what was announced, what it means, what's the plans going forward into 2024.
And if there are other people that you would like us to work with and talk to at the end of reInvent, let us know. We will do our best to get hold of them and have your questions answered by them and have the discussion with you guys. So let us know. Your feedback is always welcome. Okay, shall we jump into the main agenda for today?
Yes, definitely. I'm going to put this article. This is the blog post of the AWS joins the FinOps Foundation. Putting that in the comments as well to have as a reference to have a read more details about what that means, the different roles. All right. Well, the first one we've got on the agenda is RDS Blue Green. So, for those of you new to the show, what we do, we're going to review and rate a couple of the newest AWS announcements, talk about what it means from a cost perspective. Rahul and I give them a rating of 1 cloud to 5, and also tag them as does it simplify or add complexity into your existing framework. And then at the end of the show, we're also going to take some time to talk about cost optimization. If you're just starting out, where should you start to get the most return on your effort? Because there's lots of different approaches. We want to talk about that almost in a Gartner Magic Quadrant sort of sense of where do all the different optimization pieces fit. It's a bit trickier because you don't know until you do it, or at least you don't know how many elastic IP addresses you have that are idle until you run the analysis. But we're going to have a good discussion about what you can expect on a typical account. Okay, great. RDS Blue Green. Let's put this on the screen and figure out what exactly this means for us.
So this is actually the optimized writes. Now, one of the big issues with databases is that you want your writes to be as fast as possible, and of course, you should be able to leverage read replicas as much as possible to be able to handle multiple different reads. Writes invariably become the bottleneck for scaling because you have one master writer and you have multiple readers, and you can have up to 6 with RDS. You can actually have up to 16 readers. So that's pretty neat. You can have your BI and analytics tools just operate out of a reader node while all the writes go to the one master node. Now there you get bottlenecked on how much you can actually write and how fast you can write them, and the scale basically gets bogged down by write capacity. So with optimized writes, you can now basically enable that for MySQL and MariaDB and for Postgres as well, I think. Or is that only... I thought I saw Postgres as well. No,
MySQL,
I think it's still for
RDS, and
MariaDB. Correct. And so you can enable that for that one. I assume that Postgres is coming soon, if I'm not mistaken. And then, so you actually get much more capacity on your write node with this. And the nice thing I like about it is that you can actually make that migration in a blue-green-like deployment automatically. So you actually have almost no downtime, which is pretty amazing. For databases, which are production databases, having no downtime is a phenomenal feature.
Yeah, it's amazing to think we used to get these emails, okay, database is down for the weekend, and you'd have this team, racing around the clock to make sure it worked. And if they didn't have it, then come Monday, work was at a standstill, right? If the patch didn't go well, and hopefully they had to have a rollback plan. So it's neat that you can do these updates now in line. And this pattern is of having a dedicated write sync. I mean, this is a typical pattern, but it's neat to see it at scale. I'm thinking about, in my NAS, I've got 2 NVMe drives that are a write cache. And so if I'm writing a lot of video to the NAS very quickly, it will write to the NVMe drives and then later mirror it out to the slower drives. And this is kind of the same thing, but at cloud scale. It's saying you can write really quickly, it will put it somewhere and then later replicate it out.
Exactly. And so this one, basically with read replicas and the write masters, that's a very, very good pattern to scale. Invariably, you see the scenario where your application is working just fine. Suddenly, someone decides to turn on analytics on that database, and they're hitting the same database with a bunch of queries for dashboards. And suddenly you find that your entire database is literally crippling because of those queries. And everyone needs BI, everyone needs dashboards. So you can't shut that feature off. So this separating out the reads from the writes with another replica just makes it easier for you to manage this database cluster without having to really do much effort. And now with this new optimized writes, you can get 2x better write throughput on the same database without having to make a change. So it literally just doubles your capacity if that is what is throttling your database performance.
So I love how it says with a single click, you can promote the green environment to the new production system. So it's on your next deployment. Oh, sorry. Here we go.
Yep, there we go.
With a single click, promote the green environment to the new production system. No changes to your application and no data loss.
Correct. And that, for me, is the thing that really simplifies the solution. So I would absolutely give this a simplifies, and I would give this a 4.5.
And there's no pricing implications, right? This is...
Well, the optimized writes are a little more expensive, if I'm not mistaken. But again, in terms of capacity, it's cheaper than having 2 database servers. And it just reduces a ton of complexity.
Oh, I see. Okay, so even though this feature does have a cost associated with it, it's going to be cheaper than the alternative. Cheaper than the alternative. So
correct. You don't have to partition your database. You don't have to do all kinds of other strategies, which require application code changes. So even though this is a small incremental charge, if I'm not mistaken, I have to go back and look at the cost implication of this. But if I remember right, it wasn't very much.
Let's have a look quickly. Pricing, RDS pricing. Okay.
No, you should just look at RDS. Yeah, by RDS engine, go to MySQL. Just click on the MySQL. Yeah. And then
pricing over here.
Pricing there. Got it. You can look at on demand. That's fine. Great. And then does it?
I wonder if this is a transfer cost.
No, it's not a data transfer cost. It is not a transfer cost.
Oh, so what is...
This is a write. It's your optimized writes.
All right, we'll have to figure this out. But
can we go to the blog post?
Yeah.
Go back to the blog post. And then let's look at the... Go back to the link that's at the beginning of that article. Yeah, that one. So it just takes you to the features.
Here we go. RDS optimized. Oh, here it is. RDS optimized writes right here.
It's available, and you can go up to 256,000 IOPS.
That's really
on your provisioned IOPS.
Cool. And here's the optimized right site.
Yeah.
All right, this is exciting. Links are in the description. So simplifies and a 4.5. That's a really good score.
Yep.
All right. Well, let's take a 30-second break, and we come back. Our next one is going to be about credit sharing across accounts. I'm excited to hear about that. So we will be right back after the break.
Some tools just find AWS cost savings and make you do all the work. Visualizing cost opportunities is great, but that's not enough. CloudFix, on the other hand, actually delivers those savings for you. And you don't need to worry because CloudFix is AWS recommended and easy to use. It's the only tool that fixes cost-saving opportunities and not just finds. It's the easiest way to save money on AWS. It's all 100% automatic and risk-free. And the best part of all, it works non-stop. Stop overspending on AWS and click on the button to start saving now.
I was thinking about the optimized rights, and we talk a lot about managed services. I'm sure we'll be talking about it again. But that's one of those things where this is a new feature. If you've done the work to use RDS, and this blog post comes out and you say, wow, I can write 2x faster and have a net cheaper piece of infrastructure, a net cheaper RDS instance. That doesn't happen if it's on-prem, right? Best case, you keep it the way it is. You don't just get a 2x.
Actually, I was just looking at the thing. It looks like there's no price implication. It is, you pay for whatever the storage tier you actually are using. And they just added a new feature that just optimizes the way the writes are actually executed. And so you just get the 2x performance boost by turning it on.
Yep. So you just pay for the architecture, or you pay for the infrastructure and the IOPS, but it's not any more expensive IOPS.
Correct. Exactly.
Great. And okay, so that's exciting. So the only downside is that if you're writing a lot, you can use your IOPS faster. I remember this.
Yes.
A long time ago, I saw this announcement of this really fast internet connection speed that was achievable for the first time, this Wi-Fi. And they said, okay, if you had a cell phone plan that could actually support this, you'd run out of data in about a day.
True.
But with provisioned IOPS, you can provision a whole lot. Correct. You can definitely saturate this. All right, let's jump into member account level credit sharing preferences.
I love this. I actually really like this. And this is where I have a very strong opinion about how this should be used. So number one, let's just talk about what the feature is. The feature basically says that now when you get credits, whether it be service credits that you negotiate with the service teams, or credit for... You gotta bring it up. I can't read the...
$100 AWS credits.
Correct. $100 AWS credits. Okay. Got to get a little bit more in focus. But whatever credits you have, whether it be for discounts, whether that be for, whatever credits for working with product teams or for your volume or whatever, whenever you get a credit, in the past, it would basically just apply to your overall bill at the end of the day, which basically means that every participant or allocating those credits was generally hard, because if it was an EC2 credit or a particular service that everyone was using, you would basically just distribute it across all the different teams as is. But one of the things that I have personally wanted to do forever, and I've spoken about this earlier, is I do believe that changing organizational behavior is incredibly hard, especially when it comes to cost optimization and efficiency. And so one of the practices that worked really well for us was the concept of chargeback. The idea of the chargeback was very simple. Whatever the costs are, if there are costs that are aligned with the behavior that we want within the org, then we figure out a way to discount it and charge it back to those particular subunits or organizations. And if there are charges associated with resources and best or practices that we did not want or that were not aligned with how we wanted to do it, then those would basically incur a tax. Okay. Now, credits would invariably either go to the account where the credits originated, or they would go to the master account and get equally distributed. But now we have the ability to take the credits and apply them to the centralized best practice scenario. So let me give you a simple example. If you had a single massive Aurora database that was being used for all development work, you say, no, I don't want everyone to launch their own RDS instances because it just adds too many tiny little databases that are barely ever going to be used. Instead, we have the centralized database, go provision your database schema within it and use it. In such cases, you can literally use all the credits to discount that centralized database to bring about the right behavior within the org and let everyone else pay tax on the regular billing rates. And I think that's a much better way to utilize these credits. I know it seems very shocking that you could do something like that within an org. Every time I've spoken to people about it, they feel like that's almost impossible within their org. But trust me, it's probably one of the easiest ways to bring about behavioral change. I mean, I'm a huge believer in behavioral economics and all the science behind it. And if there is one thing in this space that brings business, finance, engineering, and all other participants on the same page, it is the P&L. And if your P&L has a huge tax on it, for whatever reason, your business unit guys and your finance guys will immediately jump on it and say, why is this so high? They will make it a priority. So all the problems that you have around making something a priority go away when you do chargeback in that fashion. So I'd recommend you start looking at chargeback that way across your orgs. I think you'll see huge change within the org happen very, very quickly. And therefore, I love this announcement, by the way. I think it simplifies the way accounting can be done. And it just makes the behavioral change a lot faster to implement. So simplifies, and I'd give this a 4.
There we go. I still remember the first day of intro to microeconomics, and it said, okay, this is the fundamental axiom of the whole thing. People respond to incentives.
Correct.
And it's the entire axiom of all of economics, right? Is that what's the demand curve? What's the supply curve? What's the equilibrium? But it all comes down to incentives exist to change your behavior. And this is a great example. And it's neat, like you said, that you can separate these. I mean, imagine if you're in a big organization. I was thinking about a university, right, that may have some standing infrastructure and then maybe some research departments, and they want to be in a master payer account for organizational reasons. But definitely, if you have a grant that gives you credit for research, you don't want that to be, I don't know, keeping the lights on for the billing system across the whole university. That's doesn't make sense. So by credit sharing, allocating right to the right account, that's a much better way to do things.
Yeah. I'll tell you one behavior that's always bothered me within the team. So when we first signed the EDP, one of the general, behavior patterns that we saw within the org was that developers would come and say, hey, but we are committed to spending this much money. Like, why are we spending time on optimizing and bringing in more efficiency? And I think that that discount or the credit that came from the EDP and the commitment that we ended up signing up for became the behavioral disincentive. So it's one of the reasons why I'm not a big fan of EDP because of that, because of the behavioral change it brings about. I do see the financial benefit of it, but just behaviorally, if you can separate out the EDP and all those discounting and credits from how organizations operate, I think it'll make a big change in behaviors.
Because at the end of the day, money should be fungible, and it shouldn't matter how you allocate it, as long as you want to decrease the total amount or do the same for less. And you shouldn't say, okay, we're allowed to waste it here, but we have to conserve it here. That doesn't make sense until you start looking at incentives. And if you have an accounting incentive that encourages that behavior, you're going to see it.
Exactly. We have a question over here from Ola that says, does this credit include savings plans and RIs? I believe this credit includes all credits that exist across the AWS ecosystem. These are things that apply to all services, so that should include your savings plans and RIs.
Neat. All right. Thank you for the question, Ola. We really, really appreciate it. And let's see, I've put the link in the LinkedIn description, and yeah, hopefully we can. That is a really exciting announcement. So thank you for bringing this one up. Should we go on to Security Hub?
Let's move on to the next one.
Okay, Security Hub. Security Hub launches 19 new security controls. This is not the first time we've seen an announcement like this. They are adding more and more. So let's put the link here. What are the new controls that we see this time? So this is bringing the total to 292.
Correct. So a lot of new services. So you've got EventBridge, Kafka, MQ, Route 53. So a bunch of them. In general, the reason why I brought this one up is because Security Hub is a great way for you to analyze everything that's happening across your organization, not just an account. And it's a one-stop place where you can go to at least plug all the basic holes. So this is a 101 practice. Whenever you set up multiple accounts or set up your organization, make it a point to at least once a week go into Security Hub and have your team review all the instances of issues that it brings up, because these are things that you want to act on immediately. They are security issues. They are best practices that you should have in place. And AWS is doing all the hard work of surfacing these for you. I would really recommend have alerts for them, have your team act on it as soon as these recommendations come up in Security Hub. But this should be a priority for your ops team. They should be all over this as and when recommendations come up.
Yep. Hook it up to a Slack channel or a Google Hangout channel, whatever you use. That way you can see it right away. You don't have to remember, oh yeah, I'm bored, I'm going to hit refresh on this page. No, it should be a push to use. Correct. That way you can see it.
And just like the rest of FinOps, this aspect of DevOps, which is monitoring and maintaining security stuff, is not a one-time thing. You have to stay at it nonstop because things are happening in your environment. Your environments are changing. You're launching resources all the time. The security incidents or the findings will keep changing. And trust me, the situation out there is crazy where the simplest vulnerabilities will be attacked like crazy as soon as they surface. So you want to make sure that you are on top of this within minutes of whenever they arise. So like Stephen suggested, have a Slack channel, have a team that's looking at these all the time.
It is amazing how, for most users of the internet, it's abstracted away from us. But then if you've ever worked at my first job as a teenager, I worked at an email hosting company, just doing Linux sysadmin and running, keeping a port open just to see, wow, we just got scanned. We get scanned again. And all of the strange stuff that's happening in the background. And luckily, there are a lot of measures in place to protect it. But there's a lot of back and forth between, let's say, the good and evil of this world in finding exploits, exploiting exploits, patching things, trying to make things more sandboxed, more separate. There's a lot happening there. It used to be if you ran a WordPress site on a LAMP stack, if you didn't update MySQL the second they announced something, your website was not going to be showing what you wanted it to. So
very true. Very, very true.
So yeah, keep an eye on security and make sure you get this. So Security Hub and EventBridge. I wonder what exploits are out there for EventBridge. That's really interesting. Or what people are trying to do. I mean, if you could somehow spoof an event to get into the system to say, do something with a transaction or a user interaction.
Yeah, I think it might relate to the IAM policies associated with EventBridge. Like you don't want everyone to subscribe and you don't want everything to be published everywhere. You want to basically adopt the best practices around EventBridge because there are tons of security loopholes even within that because it's a pub subsystem. You might have a lot of sensitive data that's actually being transmitted as part of those events. So you want to be very careful about what gets exposed and how it gets exposed.
Absolutely. And with Route 53, right? That's another way. DNS security is a big deal, correct, right? You see large institutions still fall victim to this, where if someone can change your DNS, they can control effectively what your address is on the internet. So this is great. You can be alerted to this. Oh, and look, they've got an SNS topic for you. I've got a SNS to Slack pipeline that I use. You can actually find that right in the what was it called? The serverless apps.
Yes.
It's really easy to install those. It would take you 2 seconds to wire up a SAM template to say, okay, this goes to that. You can use a SAM serverless connector for that. All right.
We'll find the link and we'll paste it over here. But I would rate this as a tremendous simplifies. You should be on top of this all the time. Having the SNS topic to subscribe to is amazing. And I would give this a good 4.
Do you know what the price is of Security Hub? Okay, so there is some cost, but it seems it's one of those things like it's never. I've never heard it being an onerous cost.
No, it's not an onerous cost, and I think it's based on the number of resources that you are actually monitoring. But I think it's a it's a fractional cost, so it shouldn't really have an impact.
I'd imagine it's like the compute optimizer.
It's like the compute optimizer.
Enhanced infrastructure metrics says 0.0004 per instance hour. Yeah, that's
Correct.
well worth
something
it.
Like that. Yeah.
All right, let's have a look at OpenSearch offers the new IM4 Amazon OpenSearch service now offers EC2 IM4GN instances. So I'm posting this link now in the comments. Please, if you're watching, please say how many of you are using OpenSearch. Really curious. Oh, actually, before we move on, we have another question from Santosh. Let's put this here. How do you use the consolidated controls view in Security Hub to see a list of your controls across different standards?
Okay, I think so. In Security Hub, all the findings are basically, they have an associated NIST standard that is associated with what those findings are. So here, so this is the NIST standard. Great. So yeah, most of them actually follow these, and you'll see if you go to the Security Hub. Let me see if I can quickly log in. And do you have a console open, by the way?
Yeah, give me 1 second. I'll do this off screen.
I'm going to try and bring up a console over here as well to kind of walk through something. I'm going to probably take. I have a lot of two-factor authentications and a bunch of other security things that I have to go through. Let me see if I can get this done in time.
I'll have a console open in 1 moment here.
Great. I'll let you bring it up.
Same thing. I'm finding my two-factor. There we go. Okay, so we go to Security Hub. Now, on this particular account, I have not enabled Security Hub, so let's put it on screen and have a look. Actually, I could just move the tab into there. Okay, so here's Security Hub.
Great. So let's go to the Security Hub right there. Perfect. So here you can see the security standards that you can enable. So you've got the AWS Foundation Security Best Practices, the CIS ones. There are 2 versions of that. And then you've got the NIST ones, and you've got PCI DSS, which is for all your credit card storage. And if you've basically got applications that do those kind of things, then you want to make sure PCI DSS are enabled, and you can manage all of that. Now, when you actually enable this and you go to the Security Hub console, all the findings by region there. So it'll actually do the standards, and you'll see the findings by region. Can you go to the findings tab? There we go. Great. So it'll tell you what the severity is, what the workflow status is, also the resource, and what is the compliance status for that. So you can look at all of this within the Security Hub itself. And so you can filter on whatever parameters you want, and you can manage this across. You can manage it by account, you can manage it by region, you can manage it by the standard if you wanted.
Well, it looks like my account is okay so far, but it's only had about 10 seconds to do some analysis. So we'll come back to this.
The insights part of it is also pretty neat. If you actually go to insights, it actually gives you a summary, and you can start targeting things by category like this. And it becomes much easier to tackle them like in bulk when you're doing these.
S3 buckets. Oh, I know I have some public buckets here. I mean, I know that they're public, but
right.
Okay.
It'll come up. It'll scan it and it'll bring that all up.
All right. Oh, I'm sure it's doing its scans right now. So that's why it looks like I'm passing with flying colors here. But
yeah, it'll be a few minutes. Anyway, I hope that answers your question, Santosh.
Cool.
Shall we move on to the next one?
Yeah, and I'll check back on the see if it gets populated later. So let's check out the IM4GN. This is one of those long instance names. Let's have a look at the IM4GN. So over here, this is on the IM4GN page. It says IM4GN and IS4GN are optimized for workloads that manage larger data sets and need a higher storage density per vCPU. So this is large OLAP distributed file systems, Hadoop. IM4GN, IS4GN provide up to 56% lower cost per terabyte than I4G. So the users of I4GN are going to be larger, denser workloads.
Yeah. I mean, a classic case for this is when you have tons of logs coming into a system and you want alerts you want alerts to be created. Now, OpenSearch is pretty amazing for that. It can store all the logs. It can store it at scale. You don't need to sit and partition it all the time. It's really straightforward to do. And at the same time, you can just set up metrics with OpenSearch where you can decide that beyond certain thresholds or beyond certain anomalies within those thresholds, you get alerted and it raises an alarm. It's a CloudWatch alarm. That alarm can then be used to trigger other activities and events. So it's a very simple way of leveraging OpenSearch to do this at scale without really running into issues. So I would recommend you use OpenSearch for scenarios like that. And if you're doing that and you have tons and tons of logs that you absolutely must store and analyze, then having the IM4GN or the IS4GN volume types makes a lot of sense, or instance types makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and that's exactly what they call out here, these log analytics use cases. In terms of availability, this is 11 regions immediately, and I assume anywhere where the IM4GN exists and where our OpenSearch is already supported, that's going to be the rollout there.
That's right.
That is incredible. 30 terabytes of NVMe SSD storage with Nitro SSDs.
Correct. I mean, these are pretty fast and pretty amazing. Yeah. And 30 TBs in today's time seems like, I mean, even though it sounds a lot, especially for us who've been looking at logs for some time, but 30 TB today, if you have a large multi-resource system, 30 TBs is actually not hard to fill up very quickly. So you want to make sure that you also have mechanisms to purge old data so that you're not constantly looking at the old data to do this stuff. So take your data that's old, that you're not going to look at, that's not relevant. Maybe a week of data is enough to do these kind of real-time analytics. And anything that's over a week, you just dump it back into S3 and put it in cold storage so that you can retrieve it when you need it. But more often than not, the scenario is going to be that you're never going to need it.
Well, and also to look at what you're actually logging, right? I think when you're debugging, as you're first developing things, it's very easy to print out the same data structure several times as it changes state, and that can be helpful, but you don't want to be, once you scale up, you don't want to be storing copies of that in your CloudWatch logs forever.
Exactly.
Or pushing it into OpenSearch forever. You can have these rotation policies. You have a way to get rid of the old ones. Set your retention policy so that you say, okay, an error that I need to catch in the logs, I can catch it within a reasonable amount of time, say 7 days or maybe 90 days if you were in a much more regulated environment, but something like that so you can catch the errors while they're there.
Exactly.
Without holding on to it forever, right? You don't want to be a data hoarder.
Correct.
There are people like that. I've never deleted anything ever. And I get the logic of it. And at a personal level, that's probably attainable, but not for logs for a high volume service.
Correct. Agreed.
How do we rate this one?
I'm neutral on whether it simplifies things or not, I'm still debating between the IM4GN and the IS4GN. Like they've got two choices over there, and yeah, I think the multiple choices just make it harder to decide which one, and you have to get into the nitty-gritty details of those. So I'd say neutral, but they're very descriptive about exactly what it does.
And so on the cloud scale, we think probably this still seems like a 3.5.
Yeah, 3.5. I think I'd give it 3.5.
It will be interesting if, as OpenSearch serverless grows and more of the underlying hardware gets abstracted away. But I guess for a long time they will have the OpenSearch managed service as well. Or I guess not managed, but they're both managed. The OpenSearch installed service,
Correct,
with standing infrastructure.
Yeah.
Well, we've got 10 more minutes left. Should we do the Kendra connectors? And then I want to talk about the
sure
different the effort versus output as well. So let's do both of those.
Great.
So Kendra releases 11 connectors for 11 JDBC data sources to enable structured data search.
Yep. So we are living in the world of generative AI and RAGs, which is retrieval augmented generation, which is when you have additional data that you want to search through or retrieve data from there. That's becoming very, very popular as a standard use case now. There are tons of tools out there to leverage. Kendra has been doing that for a while, where you just dump all the data into Kendra, and it gives you all the NLP-based searches, a Google-like search in a sense, but it gives you a bunch of NLP-based searches right out of the box. And if you're not going to have a full-fledged conversation, Kendra actually takes care of the vast majority of use cases that people actually have with the data that they're looking at. And now that you have, now Kendra can actually look at all the structured data within databases as well, because a lot of databases, in fact, all the databases invariably have structured data within them. So it's easy for Kendra to pull those up and index them and then search for them. And now that you have the JDBC connectors that can connect to all these different data sources, you can start using Kendra for the data that's residing in those. And you can basically slice out a subset of the data, kind of like how you do it with Athena, where you provide data sets with certain JDBC queries. You can kind of do the same thing with Kendra, decide how much of the data is available to Kendra via SQL queries, and use that for searching.
So this is going to eliminate a lot of people's glue code of having database rights then be mirrored to some Kendra index. This is going to make it a lot easier to just connect them directly.
Correct. Exactly. So I think this definitely simplifies. It makes it really simple to connect all these different data sources and have one place where you can analyze all of them. And I would give this 4 clouds.
Awesome. Well, links are in the descriptions. All right. Let me turn off that banner. We're not 4 clouds. All right. I wanted to spend the last bit of the show talking about if you're just getting started on your cost optimization journey and you think, okay, well, we have our blog, we have lots of different, in cloud fixes parlance, finder fixers, things that will identify cost savings opportunities and go out and fix them. And we're very happy to say we publish how they all work. There's no secret magic of how they're supposed to work.
Can I just pull up the website and just show an example of the blog?
Absolutely. Let's put that back on screen. Okay, so here's one, Kendra idle indexes, right? So if you have people who are using Kendra, you can have idle indexes, which you don't want to pay for. Kendra does get it's on the pricier side of services. And so we show, okay, here's a Kerr query on how to find Kendra indexes, how to figure out if it's idle by using the API. Here's the API calls that we can describe it. Here's how to get CloudWatch metric statistics on this thing called index query count. So how often is the index being used? And if that is 0 all the time, then we say, okay, this index isn't being used at all. And then finally, how to delete the Kendra idle index. And the cloud fix, super cool in that it would do all this for you. But if you want to implement it yourself, you have all of the knowledge to do so yourself. And so there's lots of different ones here. So if you're starting with an
just go to resources and go to blogs.
Let's see.
So just go to resources on the top menu.
Oh, yeah, sure. Resources and then blog.
And then you go to blog.
Yeah.
And
cloudfix.com/blog.
Correct. And you should see all of the finders, the fixers. In fact, just look for the topics that are fixers, and you will be able to find all of our recommendations.
And there we go. We've got AMD instances, right sizing, OpenSearch. That is a really big one. It's very easy when you're first speccing out an OpenSearch cluster. Yeah, 10 terabytes or 100 terabytes, whatever you want it to be. Then as data starts filling in, that tends to be at a regular, predictable rate. Correct. And you can resize. That's a great part about the cloud. It's elastic. You can resize. Idle Neptune instances, right? If you have a big team and there's people trying Neptune and then forgetting that they forgot to turn it off, you want to get rid of your idle Neptune instances. CloudTrail to duplication, moving your managed services to Graviton. Idle QuickSight users. So if you're using QuickSight, it's so easy to just add new users. But then that's still, a Netflix subscription per user per month. So you want to be aware of who's using it and who isn't. That way you can get rid of the idle QuickSight users. There's a lot there. S3 intelligent tiering, GP2, GP3. So Rahul, where would you start if you had an AWS account that had never been optimized before? Okay, what's the biggest win that you would go for right off the bat? And this is an average AWS account. We're not talking about some weird special case like some computational simulation lab where they just use EC2. We're just talking about the average consumer. Where would you start?
Okay, so the average consumer basically has 4 services that are going to be at the top of their list. The first one is going to be EC2. We've spoken about this earlier. Roughly 40% of spend on your account is going to be on EC2. The second area is going to be on your storage, which is, I'd say, a combination of S3 and EBS volume. So I'm usually I talk about them as separate buckets, but let me club them for this particular scenario. So I'm going to put them in 3 categories overall. But second category is storage. And then the third category is invariably RDS, where there's spend. And then the fourth one for me works out to be networking. So the 2 areas where I would start off almost immediately is shutting off instances, especially in the dev and staging environment, using the EC2 scheduler around the times that your developers are not going to be working. So turn your instances or basically hibernate them automatically using the EC2 scheduler for the 16 hours that your developers are not going to be working on those instances. This doesn't affect production, but it affects every single dev and staging and QA environment that you have. And that basically is invariably more than what you typically spend for production. There are tons of these small machines that add up to a lot, and they just waste tons of money. So that's the first thing I would do, because it's very, very low effort. It has low impact from a production workload standpoint. And at the same time, it yields huge value. So it kind of falls in that amazing magic quad that has tons of value. The second one, of course, is going to be, I would immediately attack the networking aspect of it, where I would make sure that I have everything within the VPC, try and limit everything to one region, one availability zone if I can, so there isn't a lot of inter-region or inter-AZ data transfer that's happening. And I would also ensure that there are VPC endpoints that are set up for services like S3 and DynamoDB and the likes, where I am not going over the internet to access these services. So that's the second biggest bang for the buck.
We have 2 fixtures on idle VPCs, but then you also want to make sure that you are using VPCs where they need to be used. So I always think about it like this way. Imagine if you had a house and every time you walked in your front door, but then walked out your back door, but then walked in your front door, you had to pay for it.
Correct.
We think, wow, I want to fix that. And VPC endpoints are a way of saying, what? Don't say if you have data somewhere and it's going to round trip through an AWS service and then back to you. VPC endpoints are a way to do that a lot cheaper than sending it over the internet, where you're going to pay an egress charge.
Correct.
For no reason.
And the data transfer charges add up very, very quickly. So that's the reason why I would attack it very quickly. Now, for someone who's just starting off with AWS, your storage costs are not likely to be insanely high to start with. But the next thing that I would tackle is make sure that by default, you're just using GP3 volumes everywhere. And you've turned on S3 intelligent tiering. Those are two simple things you can just make sure that those are just defaults and standards across the board. And once you've got that set up, I think you should be safe, at least managing your costs to a reasonable extent. So there are two things that I would turn on very quickly, immediately after. And then comes the hard one, which is RDS. Even though it might seem counterintuitive, the first thing that I would actually start with RDS is make sure that you're using an RDS proxy in front of your database. The reason why I say that is because invariably any changes that you need to make to your database at a later stage, if you have the RDS proxy in place, those other changes become way simpler to deal with, because then your applications don't need any changes. They're constantly talking to the proxy. Even if the database goes down for a minute or whatever while it's reshuffling or changing instance types or doing something else, your RDS proxy is going to queue those requests. It's going to cache them, and then it'll execute them whenever the database becomes available behind it. So the RDS proxy is something that you should absolutely use. And it's also a best practice whenever you're using Lambdas. Lambdas should always use RDS proxy for a simple reason that you don't want every Lambda function to create its own connection to the database. It's a terrible, terrible use of your database if every Lambda is making its own connection. You get connection pooling right out of the box with the RDS proxy, so use that as a simple mechanism to ensure that your Lambdas are more efficient. In fact, setting up the connection and making that happen at the beginning of every Lambda call costs you money. It's probably going to be 20 to 30% of your Lambda's invocation time. And so you can just eliminate that. If you already have a pool that's ready, the connection is ready, the Lambda can immediately start operating on that connection right away with the RDS proxy.
And that's one of those things where you will not see that when you're debugging. It's going to be fine.
Yes.
It's going to look really cheap. And then if you do one of those big Lambda fan outs, it'll start 3,000 Lambdas a second. Well, you really want to know, okay, if you can cut that down 30%, and also you can really bog down a database trying to make all new connections.
Correct.
Because connections are heavier than you'd think. They have to start a new connection object and be keeping track of it until it times out and having all the session stuff. To be able to use an RDS proxy. So these are great suggestions and a great order for how to tackle things.
It's a good reminder. I should actually put out these tips. I will start putting out a few quick shorts to kind of advertise or to share all of these tips with everyone. So watch out for those. I'll make an announcement on LinkedIn. If you aren't following me, please follow me. I will make a post on that within the next couple of days.
Absolutely. Really looking forward to that one. I wanted to do one, speaking of shorts, I wanted to play one of the shorts from our interview with Rick and kind of have a quick chat about where these fit in, and then we'll wrap up for today. So
Sounds
one
good.
second.
Cloud safely without hurting performance is buying discounts, whether that's RIs and savings plans, right? Make sure you're fully utilizing the option to prepay for your resources that have consistent usage. Next is generally cleanup, like deleting unattached EBS volumes, IP addresses, any sort of resource or object in your accounts that is no longer serving a purpose. Then you have suspension. AWS provided solutions for suspension, and that is just turning the lights off when you leave the room, turn off your instances if they're not in use. You no longer need to achieve a 5 nines in your dev environment, only keep them on when they're needed. And then lastly, right sizing. And I put right sizing last because the engineering effort is higher for right sizing. It's more complex. We have Compute Optimizer. AWS Compute Optimizer is a first-party product we have in the console. It is a free product. You can go enable it on your accounts today, and within a day or so, you'll receive recommendations based on the historical utilization of your instances.
So that was a really fun conversation with Rick. And so thinking about what you had said in that context, right? We're talking about cleanup. So cleanup, idle resources. And then also, what was the second one he said?
Turn off the lights.
Turn off the lights. Suspension.
Yeah.
Suspension. Right. So suspend,
Correct.
Use the EC2 instance scheduler. I guess I would also add configurations. I think that those are things like your VPC setup, your S3 intelligent tiering, things that are just changes to the way you're using. Correct. Even RDS proxy might fall into that bucket of you're still using RDS, but you're changing the way you're using it a little bit and putting in this shim in place so that later when you make changes, that's going to be a lot easier.
Correct.
And I think about Compute Optimizer in the same bucket, right? At first you start by choosing your instance types, but then if you have this layer where, okay, your instance types get chosen by Compute Optimizer, then it makes it easier to do retyping to newer instances as they come out because you've already got the infrastructure there.
Correct.
All right. Well, I think there's been we're a little bit over, 7 minutes over. I hope this was useful. Thank you, audience, for being here. And we will see you next week. We're going to be talking about reInvent, talking about what sessions to go to. Oh, no. Next week, we've got Alex Kearns.
Correct.
And then we've got a reInvent session. Alex Kearns, he is a consultant and an AWS ambassador. His good friend that I've made, seeing him at different conferences over the years. Looking forward to seeing him. And we talked to him last reInvent, did we not?
Last reInvent, yes. He was on my podcast called AWS Insiders. And he was, I think, my first reInvent guest. Was absolutely fun to talk to him. And he had some really interesting insights from all of his experience.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone, for being here. And we will see you next week. Bye-bye, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.
Some tools just find AWS cost savings and make you do all the work. Visualizing cost opportunities is great, but that's not enough. CloudFix, on the other hand, actually delivers those savings for you. And you don't need to worry because CloudFix fixers are AWS recommended and easy to use. It's the only tool that fixes cost savings opportunities and doesn't just find them. It's the easiest way to save money on AWS. It's all 100% automatic and risk-free. And the best part is that it works non-stop. See for yourself. Click on the button to get a free demonstration of CloudFix and stop overspending on